So welcome to the Do Nothing Project. This is the great project of doing nothing first thing on Monday morning to offset the insane hurly-burly productivity of our work-obsessed culture. So we tune in from far away, hey guys, from all around, and we tune in locally. In this case, we're in Guelph, which is my new home, and this is a new studio that's opened up. We just started these Monday morning meditations, so welcome everybody. Yeah. So today we're going to explore this very important idea of surrender in both a practice, and I'll say a little bit about it right now just as a kind of concept within meditation, because it's probably one of the most overused words, you know, in spirituality and meditation. You're always hearing people say surrender, let go. And so I wanted to say a little bit about what they're talking about and why that's so valuable. I mean, I think it's very common sense for a lot of people, but for a lot of people, especially in our culture, people kind of, our culture is so focused on acting, on doing, on bearing down, on efforting, on the will, that we often hear about this notion surrender as being somehow something passive or something. Why would we want to do that? Surrendering is like being defeated. But the idea of surrender is really is about it's equanimity, and it's the very tricky and deep skill of allowing reality to be what it is. That most of the time we're trying to negotiate and push on reality, and we're putting all this energy and effort into trying to direct things to go the way we want them to go. And so the surrender is saying, actually, there's nothing wrong with bearing down. There's a kind of dialectic in life between bearing down and easing up, between using your will and surrendering to kind of the larger unfolding, but that we're overcompensated in the direction of bearing down. And that the surrender is this practice of letting go and letting what's already happening in the world sort of take you along. And then you can kind of have these miniature acts of bearing down, of acting within that flow that end up being far more effective because they're in line with what seems to be rolling out anyway. So it's a very deep practice. You know, the practice of surrender just goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, because you can always notice another layer in which you're actually fighting with your experience still. And then you realize, oh gosh, all this energy in this layer is bound up and really trying to make this kind of thing happen. And then eventually you can kind of notice it, and there can be a letting go, and then this great release of energy. That's why people often talk about this surge of vitality and life when they right after they let go. And then you're letting go, and then you feel like you're in the stream, and all of a sudden then you kind of realize there's another layer that of something you've been holding on in some way, in which some constriction because you're so scared or fearful or whatever it is. And that's the continual process in a practice, is this process of, it's kind of like exfoliating the layers, going through these layers of rigidity and coagulation and getting ever more free. And then ever more, and then you get to this paradoxical place within a practice where you are, it feels like the bearing down and the surrender are one thing in a way, where you're so open to how reality is that the exact right pulses of effort of bearing down seem to just emerge spontaneously through you. They're part of what wants to happen in this in the moment kind of thing. So you have this paradoxical action, which is the classic kind of contemplative thing, the kind of the doing without a doer, you know. Anyway, that was a bit of weird deep end theory, but the surrender is super relevant for our lives because it's a way to kind of recalibrate with what's really going on and free up all of this energy. And we're going to practice this in an actual meditation practice right now. So the Do Nothing Project, we've been practicing all kinds of different versions of different flavors of meditation. Usually there's always a kind of bias towards at least just staying aware. You might be just sitting in open awareness, or you might be working with the breath, or who knows what it is. In this meditation, we'll start with an anchor. We'll start with a more deliberate concentration thing. But then we're going to move into a pure and total practice of surrender, of not needing to control experience in any way, really trying to let go and just trust. And sometimes that might mean we end up daydreaming, or we end up off in thinking. Sometimes it might mean that we sort of feel spaced out, but other times what can happen is it's just this great surrender, this great settling can happen sort of spontaneously. So we're going to explore that, what it really looks like to let go within a meditation practice. So I'll guide a practice for about 5 minutes. It's more about bearing down and being concentrated. Then the invitation is, can you just let go of that, let go of any attempt to control your experience and just see what happens. So awesome. All right, guys, so I'll see you on the other side here. We'll do about a 25-minute meditation. Should I close that door?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Thank you.
Do the lights. Keep them
Oh,
on.
no, that's cool. Okay, good. So settling into our meditation posture. As always, if there's a practice you like to go to that's familiar for you, you're welcome to completely tune me out and do that. And if you want to follow along with this practice, I like to start my sit with sort of taking a few deep breaths. Sort of signifying to letting the body know that the meditation is starting. And as I breathe in, stretching up the spine, finding some alertness. And the out breath is the settling. And really throughout this practice, certainly at the beginning, the out breath, really being deliberate about the settling and the softening, sort of softening the forehead and the cheeks and the eyes. And softening the shoulders and the hands. Think of the out breath as sort of the arriving breath, arriving on your cushion or in your chair. So we're exploring a true do-nothing practice, a true practice of surrender, of not trying to control anything about our experience. They would call it just sitting and in a Zen context. But to get a bit of a contrast, we'll start with deliberately being concentrated, trying to be concentrated. So choosing an object to work with. That might mean the feeling or the sensation of the breath. That's a very common one, the sensation of the breath maybe, or as it comes in the nose or moves into the belly, any part of that stream of sensations. Or it might mean the settling feeling on the out breath, you're just sort of noticing the body settling. Or a contact with the ground, or the hands, or sound. I mean, lots of different objects. So choose something now, and then really commit yourself to that. So the mind wanders, you bring it back, you're just trying to feel this sensation as fully as you can, noticing the subtlest part of it, really staying on it quite deliberately with that samurai commitment. Good. So concentration is all about, you choose something to pay attention to, and then you try to bring all the strands of your attention to merge into this one thing. Knowing, of course, there'll always be random active strands in the periphery. You'll be aware of things around you. But seeing if you can really kind of dedicate yourself to the sensation of breathing, for example. Getting very still, noticing the softest part, getting absorbed by it. When your mind wanders, you deliberately bring it back, like doing a muscle rep. And this is a really beautiful activity. It's just like we begin to, as we commit to an object, we begin to appreciate the simplicity and elemental quality of this thing we're doing. Just breathing, just feeling the body, just listening. Okay, good. So you can stay with this if you like, or if you want to follow along with this exploration of true do nothing, true surrender. The move now is to just even let go of that, to not need to follow the breath or to have no agenda really. What would happen if you just completely let go and just let your attention spontaneously go where it goes? So it's not fixated in any way, you're not trying to get it right, or if it ends up following the breath, that's great. It's just what it does. If it ends up somewhere else, that's fine too. But the idea is to not deliberately feed or have an agenda. You're just letting go. The pure practice of surrender, doing nothing. It's like the pure practice of existing, of just true rest, not needing to make anything different, not needing to be any way, to do anything, just being. Just a few minutes left. When we leave for the last few minutes, it's like seeing if you can soften the whole front of your brain, like unfurl it and let it just flop back into the back of your head. Letting go of any struggle or way in which you're fighting with yourself. And you just truly rest here. Okay, we'll just finish with like a 1-minute mini friendliness practice, kind of living for kindness practice. And for that, just let it be kind of influenced by the do nothing. So let in a kind of very lazy way, just whoever person kind of randomly comes into your mind's eye. Just think of somebody in your life that you want to send them some drifty, drizzly, do nothing, good vibes. Someone who could use a little relaxation or settling or surrendering into the stream of life. You just want to see cared for. You want to see at peace. And just kind of imagine sending some good vibes their way. Some of this do nothing, settledness. And you can repeat a little phrase if you like, may you be well, and may you be happy. May you be in the flow. And maybe it's an animal, maybe it's a little kid, a friend, family member, maybe it's yourself. Okay, good. Okay, so that was our meditation, our do nothing meditation. So basically, this every Monday morning is different because sometimes I have a ton of people, and sometimes I have just local people. I'm at home, and now in this situation, I have one friend, hey Justine, who's local, and a whole bunch of friends who are non-local. So I like to open it up after for opportunity for a report or a question. But you may feel self-conscious and not want to ask one, but you may not have one. But you're welcome to. If there's something about that meditation you're curious about, or
definitely felt the change of like focusing on the breath and then letting that go, like a whole relaxation on the prefrontal part
yeah,
of the brain.
totally.
Then I just got really sleepy, so then I was like
Yeah.
battling staying awake,
Yeah.
which is a common problem for me.
Okay. So that's great. So that report. So just in case it wasn't clear, people didn't hear it. The experience was, first of all, a real contrast between the kind of more effortful one and the do nothing. And you literally felt it as a kind of softening of the front of the brain, which I think is I feel it that way too. And I've heard, I remember it was years ago, someone made a cue like that in some meditation. I was like, oh, that's exactly right. Letting go of that part of the brain. And it was relaxing, but then it led into sleepiness.
Yeah.
So this is actually quite common, especially for a do nothing. This is why we work with the kind of more concentration type technique most of the time. I mean, it's sort of like the thing with meditation is you kind of got to find the technique that works for you at the right time, and it changes. And I think if we're sleepy, it often helps to have an object or something to give a little bit of rigor to our practice. Otherwise, we just can completely feel like we just space out and drift off or fall asleep. And the do nothing can really encourage that. It's saying, if sleepiness happens, not a big deal. Just let the sleepiness happen, just don't deliberately feed it. For some people who do nothing, they really feel like it just makes them too sleepy. So it doesn't make sense for them to do it as much. Maybe they just do it at the end. They do more of a focused practice. That would be a generic answer to that. But there's a general challenge around just sleepiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a challenge with sleepiness. There's always going to be something. So that's why I kind of think, okay, when can I meditate during the day when I'm most alert?
Yeah.
You know, finding the time that works. Having a cup of coffee before you meditate is okay, unless it makes you super wigged out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was neat. It was all my dreams from this morning though came back.
Oh, yeah.
Into that relaxed state.
Yeah.
It was like remembering like dreams that I didn't remember when I woke up.
So all the dreams from this morning kind of start coming back. Well, that's so interesting. Well, that actually directly relates to a question I wanted to answer from someone who had written in. This is a question from Landon Hall, and she was asking about daydreaming. And her question is actually related specifically to this practice. In a do-nothing practice where you're not deliberately trying to be concentrated, is it okay to daydream? Because for she says it happens regularly for me, and if I allow it, it sorts itself out eventually. But I do have to allow it for some time. If I feel that even in the do-nothing practice that daydreaming is not kosher, then I feel confused and frustrated. So I will say something here about the nature of daydreaming and the way we work with it in different practices. Daydreaming is fascinating. I actually have a chapter on daydreaming in the first book I wrote, The Head Trip. They call it task unrelated thought. It's and there's often you hear critiques of mindfulness saying, well, mindfulness is okay, but what about the fact that it seems to vilify daydreaming? It seems to say that just being out of it or daydreaming and floating is somehow not what we want. And that's not true at all. I mean, daydreaming is actually quite wonderful. It's a wonderful place of like creative ideas and new associations. And what's happening in a mindfulness technique is it's saying, okay, given that we're daydreaming a lot of the other time of the day, can we actually just have a place here where we're practicing being aware? So the thing with daydreaming is if you're doing a mindfulness practice, then the classic way you work with it is the daydream starts to happen. And you're like, oh, you notice it's happened. And you're like, okay, I'm in a daydream, and you come back to the breath or whatever. So it's sort of common sense. And the idea is that in all these subtle ways, we get taken away by things. We're always checking out of our experience. We're going over here, we're going over there. We're, in a way, we're not staying present with what's going on. So in that case, you want to notice anytime you get taken away, so you can then come back. But in a do-nothing practice, it's slightly different. In a do-nothing practice, exactly as, like you said, Landon, it's like you're just trying to exist at that point. You're just letting go of any agenda, and you're just saying, you know what, the main instruction is really, if you notice yourself trying to control your experience anyway, you just drop that control. So daydreaming will very often happen for people, and it's not a problem, so long as you're not feeding it. You just let the daydreaming kind of unspool. And if you notice that you're deliberately inside it, kind of keeping it going, that's where you might back off. But often what happens is, just in the way that Landon, you said exactly, as the daydreaming unspools, it's like it just works itself out. And then you can end up in this place kind of spontaneously of being very present and aware without ever having to try to get there. So in other words, the way to work with daydreaming and do nothing is to not make it a problem, but to just not feed it. Yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, awesome. So we're going to wrap up this part of it. Thank you guys for joining me. Be here next week. I don't really know what the topic is yet. I will, but it'll be posted ahead of time. And the meditation will be a variation of something we did today. And I'll definitely answer at least one or two questions about something. So awesome. Good luck going into your day. Good to hang out. This is the best.